Alrighty then, we are recording.
Okay, great.
The thing is on. I pressed the big red button on Adobe Audition. Green things are going
The
up.
little lines going up and down.
Woo.
Yeah. And back and forth.
Oh,
two ways.
Alrighty, folks. Today, it's an episode of the That Sharper podcast. It's me, Dirty Mike, joined by my junior associate, Big Keith, Dirty
Hello.
Keith.
Yes.
Papa Smear, whatever you want to call him.
All the above, yep.
All of those things. Glenn Danzig, as I've also called him many times. We should have. Can we just play Misfits music? You think, or do you think we'd get in trouble for that?
Oh, with them, yeah, I said we'd get in trouble.
Yeah, but you know. Well, hey, Glenn Danzig is like obsessed with like Halloween, and he's obsessed with werewolves, I believe.
Yeah, I think he'd appreciate us.
I think he maybe. Hey, if you're
right
listening,
before he sues
come
the
on
whole
pod.
office.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you never know. Alrighty, folks. Keith.
Yes.
We always like to shoot the shit. What's going on with you these days, my man?
Not much these days, man. Not much these days. Oh, but funny story, actually. Just very quickly, because it's got nothing to do with horror, but I think it's kind of funny.
Okay, skip.
So my daughter's creche has this thing where after the weekend they come in, they do a big board of what they did over the weekend. And over the weekend I did loads of stuff with my daughter. We brought her to the park, brought her to the playground, brought her to soft play, McDonald's, the zoo. We did a play date, did loads of stuff. And I went in to collect her and looked on the board. And what did she have on the board? The pub. We went to the pub for 2 pints on the Friday while she did a colouring book and had a bit of food. And then we got on with the weekend. And she's like, no, the pub. And went in on all the teachers like, oh, so you went to the pub the weekend. It's like, we did other
They
things.
think you're alcoholics.
Yeah, I
now,
know. It's like, we did other
sure.
things.
It's literally like, what do you want to do? Pub?
Yeah, the pub.
Pub? You do love your pints, though. You do love the pub.
I do love the pub, yeah, but I don't have to know that.
It's my little secret. Alrighty. Well, I think without further ado, because we got a hell of a story today.
We do, yeah.
We do. It's Big Massey is home for this whole episode. A story of horror. Which, I mean, it's set in Massachusetts. Southern Massachusetts. Which I say New England as a whole, as a region, I always associate with horror, gothic horror. Obviously, you have like Salem and shit like that there.
I was just about to say I'll do my best not to bring up
I've actually been bringing it up lately more than you. But, ghosts and a lot of famous horror writers are from there. You think of like wind and little fishing villages and waves and lighthouses and old gothic manors, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
This is definitely a story that kind of has a little bit of everything in that.
It does, yeah. It's a great story.
Today, folks, it's a story of Lizzie Borden, who may or may not, but definitely did get an axe.
Well, we'll see.
Ooh,
We'll see.
Keith is, no spoilers. There we go. Keith's already got his theories. His gears are grinding. All right. To begin, let's begin with the beginning.
Okay, that's a good place to start.
Lizzie Andrew Borden was born on July 19th, 1860, 9 years after her sister, Emma. Her father, Andrew Jackson Borden, had English and Welsh roots and was a proper self-made man. So while he didn't grow up in the dirt exactly, his family were far from well-to-do and he struggled during his early life. Andrew worked hard though and invested wisely. He had a finger in many pies, and it was in the manufacture of furniture, particularly a sideline and casket building, that made him his first significant sum and pulled him clear of the daily grind. With the cash he made from his furniture business, Andrew was able to buy properties and became a landlord quickly. He realized that's where the real dollar bills are, where you get the real money, which is so unlike today.
I know.
With
How far we've come along.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So not only did he expand his property portfolio into commercial properties, but he also invested significant amounts into several textile mills, which back in these days, in the late 1800s, was basically a cash printing business if he had the right connections. The cherry on the icing was his position as president of the Union Savings Bank and director of the Durfee Safe Deposit and Trust Company. These were prestigious titles that opened up a lot of doors, and Andrew Borden had an instant level of respectability that people took very, very seriously. The total value of Andrew Borden's estate was estimated to be around $300,000. That's back in the 1860s, 1870s, late
Still
1800s.
not to be sniffed at these days.
300,000 is still a lot of money, but these days that would be $10 million.
Jesus, yeah.
So basically he was a pretty serious business mogul in Massachusetts, had serious political sway and social influence. Basically, Lizzie Borden, Nepo baby.
Absolutely. And he definitely did have a sharp mind, a keen eye for business. But another big reason that he managed to build his fortune was that he was seriously stingy with money. Like, peel an orange in your pocket tight, this fella.
Wow.
So when he was running his side hustle of building coffins, there was rumours that he'd cut the feet off the corpses just to cram them in to the undersized caskets that he got on the cheap.
Wow, that's pretty good. That's pretty. I respect that
Right?
one, actually.
No one will know. Just put the feet in their pockets. No one has a clue. Also, when he became a landlord, so it was not uncommon to see him on his rounds with a basket of eggs. So they came from one of his farms, and he offered them for sale on his rounds. So he had his rent book in one hand, taking money, and then also, hey, do you want to buy some eggs?
Yeah, it's a good. He was a businessman.
He was a hustler. He was a businessman do business. Yeah.
He was a hustler, quite like you and I. We are podcast hustlers. Keith,
We are.
as you know.
Yeah.
As you are my junior associate, I am the primary associate of the That Chapter podcast. Andrew Borden bought the house that would become the family home in 1872. The house, the infamous house, was at 92 2nd Street, Fall River in Bristol County, Massachusetts. That's about an hour, maybe 2 hours south, directly south of Boston. You're getting close to the Rhode Island border. And specifically, it is close to the Bridgewater Triangle.
Okay.
Which is an area in southern Massachusetts, home to a very, very big forest, the Fall River Forest, and they lived in Fall River. And that's home. Okay, I actually want to do an episode on Bridgewater Triangle someday.
I'm already hooked.
Yeah, it's good. So it's basically this area that's supposedly haunted. There's been like devil worshippers, murders, UFOs. Apparently it's like one of the scariest places in America.
Amazing. Okay.
Just for freaky, weird shit that happens in this triangle and in these deep woods. I actually wanted to go there again, but I ran out of... I was supposed to be staying there for a time, but I eventually had to go home. But yeah, it's a very creepy place. That deserves a full episode, actually.
Yes.
Just entered my brain.
Okay, let's definitely do it.
All right. So there you go, folks. That was close to where Lizzie Borden was living. And the house, though, they had in Fall River, it would become the scene of one of the most outrageous and talked about murders of the 19th century. Now, the house itself, it wasn't exactly a luxury mansion you'd expect from a multi-millionaire and his family to live in. But Andrew Borden liked being close to his main business on nearby Main Street. Despite his considerable wealth, Andrew never forgot, though, that there was a time when he had nothing, and he remained reluctant to spend for the rest of his life. So instead, it fell to his family to enjoy the fruits of his labor. As Keith said, Andrew Borden was well known because of his position, but he never shook his reputation for being tight with his cash. There were even rumors around town that the Borden family home lacked indoor plumbing and electric lighting, both of which were considered standard for like a wealthy household like the Bordens back in this day.
Yeah, it's true. They'd no hot water in the Borden house at all. So not unless you boiled it yourself in the kettle. And like most well-to-do homes back then had like a wood or coal burning stoves with built-in water heaters, but not the Bordens. Their stove, it was just basic, just like every other house that was around, the run-the-mill houses. And when he bought the place, it did actually have running water upstairs. But he decided that that was an unnecessary luxury. And he had the plumbing changed just...
Can't afford it.
Yeah, get rid of that.
He spent more money to have him have less shit.
Oh, I'm sure he just ripped it out.
Yeah.
So there was no bathrooms, no upstairs taps, just cold, frugal living, all by Andrew's design.
Wow, I mean, you often hear about like billionaires and millionaires are like really tight with money, but that just seems...
It takes the biscuit.
Yeah, that seems just ludicrous. So Trent, this you've probably been wondering, I hear you barking big dog, dear listener, where is Mama Borden? What happened to Lizzie's mother, Andrew's wife? Well, despite dying when Lizzie was only 3 years old, her mother, Sarah Borden, might have had just as big an impact on Lizzie, if not even more so than her father. Another 3 years on from the death of Lizzie's mother, Sarah, Andrew met and married 37-year-old Abby Durfree Gray in 1865. So Sarah's absence, her mom, was felt strongly by the family, especially Lizzie's older sister, Emma Borden, who flat out refused to call her new stepmom, Abby, mom, or basically any other similar term of affection, and instead insisted on calling Abby by her married name, Mrs. Borden. At least initially, Lizzie got on pretty well with her stepmother and, unlike Emma, was happy to address her as mom or mother, but that would all change after a dispute over several gifts of property. See, Andrew gave to his new wife Abby, gave them a lot of stuff, gave them a lot of gifts and property. Neither Lizzie or Emma were too pleased about their inheritance taking a kicking. Emma had long disliked her stepmom Abby, thinking that Abby had only married Andrew for his moolah. After Andrew had signed over a couple of properties to relatives of Abby, Lizzie was like, well, geez, That's supposed to be mine. She
Yeah.
joined her sister on the fuck Abby train.
To be honest, I'm not even sure if Andrew liked Abby. Like, by all accounts, she was, these are reports, she was an unattractive and undesirable woman.
There you go, folks. Keith just called Abby a disgusting pig.
And this is by, like, the 1870 standards.
Yeah, that's actually pretty hardcore.
Right.
Because, I mean, you can see these pictures of, like, the belle of the ball, and it's like, her? Yeah.
It's kind of my girlfriend.
Her? I think for Andrew, the marriage, it was convenient. It was convenient means of securing a housekeeper and a nursemaid for his 2 young daughters.
Ah, the good old, I'll marry a woman so she can be my slave.
Pretty much, yeah.
Classic. So in order to try and smooth things over with his daughters, Andrew agreed to sell them their mother's old house for a nominal $1 fee, which they could then rent out and earn their own income as landlords, on top of what allowance they were already getting from their father. The thing is, though, the girls didn't realize how much work was involved and quickly regretted the deal. Andrew, again trying to keep them happy, knowing they hated his new wife, he agreed to buy back the house for $5,000, which would be a touch over $170,000 these days. Now that's remarkably generous. He sold it to them for $1 and bought it back for, like, he basically just gave them $5,000, like 170 in today's casharula.
That's how you flip a house.
Yeah, I know. He wasn't very good at this property dealing stuff, really, was he? The Borden girls were brought up to be relatively religious and attended Central Congregational Church. Lizzie was heavily involved in the church and even taught Sunday school classes. Later, she would become involved with the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Basically, she sounded like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The other key occupant of the Borden household in Fall River wasn't a Borden at all, but the family's live-in maid, Bridget Sullivan. 25-year-old Bridget was a relatively recent arrival to the United States from Ireland. Oh, jeez! The Bordens usually refer to her as Maggie. Her testimony, Bridget Sullivan's testimony, would end up being pivotal at Lizzie's trial. Basically, Bridget Sullivan, tattletale.
Oh, big time. Do you know why they called her Maggie?
Why?
So, Maggie was the name of their last maid, and they just weren't interested in learning the new name.
Bridget, no, you're Maggie. You're Maggie too.
Pretty much, yeah.
I like that.
I guess, but the Irish weren't really that popular at the time.
Yeah.
Like, we had like a lot of prejudice that we were, for being Catholic and drunks, and well, thank God we got rid of that one.
Yeah, I know.
That stereotype.
It's good. It's good nobody thinks that about the Irish anymore. Now, there was an incident in May of 1892 when Andrew Borden had killed several pigeons belonging to Lizzie. He'd also taken a hatchet to the roost Lizzie had built for them. Now, just how much of an argument this actually caused is up for debate, with some claiming that it caused great upset, and others alleged that it barely affected Lizzie and that she had seen the birds as livestock rather than pets. Now, it's possible that the argument caused by the killing of the birds is what caused Lizzie and Emma to go on a trip to New Bedford in July of 1892, but that's unlikely. The girls arrived back to Fall River a week before the murders. But Lizzie didn't return immediately home, instead choosing to stay at a local boarding house. So in the several days leading up to the killings, the Bordens had all come down with a severe bout of sickness. When this came to light in the days after the murders, rumors of an attempted poisoning spread quickly and caught the attention of investigators. Abby herself had apparently suspected someone might be making an attempt on her husband's life for some of his business practices. The real reason was overcooked mutton that had been kept for too long and used in several meals. Of everyone in the house, only Bridget hadn't eaten the mutton, so had no illness. And she was probably doing that on purpose.
Right.
Fuck your mutton. Eat this shit.
Yeah. Abby actually, she went across the street to see the local doctor, Dr. Bowen, and told him that she suspected that they were being poisoned. He asked them, what have you been eating lately? And yeah, like I said, turns out their meals that week had included some warmed over fish and mutton. That had been rehydrated and recycled into different dishes for 3 days straight. This was in the middle of a blazing hot summer. Like, I think the day of the murders, it was over 100 degrees hot.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I was like, that's not bad to use like meat for 3 days, but there's zero refrigerators
There's
back
no
in
fridge.
this day. So that's
thing,
going to go bad quickly.
Yeah. So Dr. Bowen, he reassured him that, no one's trying to poison you. They were just poisoning themselves.
Yeah.
But I don't think that they believed it. They were just like, no, that can't be it. Gotta be something else.
Somebody's out to get us. It was on the night of August 3rd, the day before the murders. The Bordens had a surprise guest, John Vinicum Morse, who was Sarah Borden's brother, Lizzie and Emma's uncle. He was set to stay with the family for a few days while he and Andrew discussed some business they had together.
This guy is such a weird and strange character.
Yeah, he kind of comes in and then leaves, and he's like, what were you doing here?
Yeah.
Why did you come here?
Yeah, like we'll get into him a bit more later, but just give you a little taste of his odd behaviour. So when he showed up at the Borden house unannounced, he didn't bring a single piece of luggage. So not a comb, a clean shirt, a toothbrush, nothing. Just vibes. Weird vibes.
Yeah.
And like he was planning on staying for a couple of days for his business.
Yeah. You'll provide everything for
Right,
me. Of course you will.
Give lend your toothbrush there.
Yeah. So, what happened on the day in question? August 4th, 1892. Now, usually the more time that passes, the more obscured details get. People die, move on, evidence is lost, opinions change. But thanks to the sheer amount of research that's been done on the Borden case over the more than 130 years since the murders, we actually have a pretty good idea of what each person was doing that day. That said, obviously there are a couple of different scenarios, and which one you find more believable depends heavily on whose word you give the most weight to. So I'll do my best to give you as accurate a play-by-play account of the day's events and each person's movements as we go through it. So, the slow boiling tensions in the Borden household over inheritance, pigeons, selling houses, renting houses, stepmoms, all this shit was just growing and growing and growing, and it came to a head Thursday, August 4th, 1892. Vinicum Morse, who strangely and bizarrely showed up, the girl's uncle, he had slept in the guest room the night before, and he joined Andrew and Abby for breakfast just before 7 a.m., which was served to them by the maid, Bridget Sullivan, who had woken first. She was the first awake. She had to prepare the breakfast, of course. The three of them chatted over a long breakfast for close to an hour before Vinicum Morse departed the house at around 10 to 9 for some business. He'd be out until noon because he planned to visit his niece, Emma and Lizzie's cousin, in Fall River. Andrew had also left the house for a walk shortly after his former brother-in-law had left, again around 9 a.m.
By the way, for breakfast, they had mutton again.
Oh, my favourite! 4-day-old mutton now.
You were told!
Sometime in the hour and a half after her husband left for his walk, Abby Borden went upstairs to clean the guest room Vinicum Morse was occupying. Now, this would later be noted as being odd by both Bridget and Emma, as the job of cleaning the guest room was one of the girls' regular household chores. When exactly Abby was killed is impossible to say, but investigators believed that would have been in the hour and a half between 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. The weapon was a small hatchet or axe, and the first blow was thought to have hit her in the side of the head, just above the ear. She then either turned to try and escape or was spun around by the impact, which caused her to fall forward to the ground, but without being able to protect herself, Abby hit her face hard against the floor. Whether or not she was conscious after this, hard to say. Considering what followed, I would certainly hope she was not conscious. She was struck again and again, 18 times in total. 1 to the face, 17 to the back of the skull.
Jesus.
Yeah, that is brutal, up close and personal as it gets. That's, man, just the thought of that is actually kind of...
It's horrific, isn't it?
Extremely horrifying.
Like, you can only, like, especially with that sort of attack, there's going to be blood and bone.
Brains
and
everywhere.
brain matter
17
everywhere.
hatchets to the back of the head. Jeez Louise. So while it's hard to say for sure which blow was the fatal one, I mean, take your pick, it's fair to say that at least half of them were unnecessary to completing the task of killing Abby, and were inflicted purely for the satisfaction of the killer, whether as an emotional release or through gaining some sick pleasure. Andrew returned home from his walk at 10:30 a.m. when he had to be let in by Bridget after the door jammed and his key would not work. Bridget specifically recalled this because it kind of pissed her off. Having to open the door for Andrew is probably like a regular occurrence, and apparently the door jamming, it happened pretty regularly. The real key event happened as Bridget passed by the stairs to open the door for Andrew. Bridget would later testify that she heard a woman upstairs laughing, and it sounded like Lizzie. So given that Abby was already dead at this point, and as we'll hear later, her body would have been visible if you're standing at the top of the stairs, therefore that strongly implicates Lizzie if Bridget did indeed hear her laughing upstairs. Lizzie denies this, however, and claims to have been downstairs, where she greeted her father on his arrival home. When he asked where Abby was, Lizzie testified that a messenger had visited shortly before and had delivered a note to Abby. After which, Abby went to visit a sick friend who apparently had requested her. This note was interesting if it even did exist.
Yeah.
Lizzie then suggested to her father that he rest and take a nap before lunch, which he gladly accepted. He agreed to do so. Bridget helped him remove his boots and fetched his slippers before he laid down on the sofa. Now, Bridget's testimony that she helped Andrew out of his boots definitely helped the defense later on to question the accuracy of her memory and her statement, thanks to crime scene photos taken of Andrew, which show him clearly still wearing his walking boots. So, if Bridget lied about taking his boots off, what else may she have lied about?
Exactly. The laughing from upstairs. Bridget said that when she was struggling to get the door for Andrew, she did say that the reason that she remembered the laughing in particular was because she was struggling so hard, she let out rather explicit language, which she claims that
fuck.
Yeah, fucking hell, which caused Lizzie to laugh from upstairs.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very good. So it was at 11:15 a.m. that Lizzie claims to have discovered her father already dead on the couch. Now, Bridget's morning had been spent largely outside cleaning the windows. She was resting in her room up on the 3rd floor when she heard Lizzie shouting to her from down the stairs, "Maggie, come quick, father's dead! Someone came in and killed him." Interesting that Bridget was upstairs in her room on the 3rd floor, walked by Abby's body, which would have been visible from the stairs.
Well, I think there's a backstairs as well.
Okay. It's good that you cleared that up. Thanks, Keith. I knew there was a reason to have you on the podcast. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the nursery rhyme based on Lizzie Borden, but I'm sorry to tell you that 81 whacks was a bit of an exaggeration, but not by much. Between them, the Bordens actually received 29 whacks. Abby took 18 of those, Andrew the other 11, which, along with the order of attack, seems to indicate that Abby was the main target of the murder. The attack on Andrew, though, had been almost as brutal as the one on his wife. The first blow had cut into his skull, splitting his eye in two. He had been completely disfigured by the assault, to the point that he was almost unrecognizable. The attack must have been very recent, though, as his wounds were still very clearly bleeding when he was discovered, meaning, though he was doomed, his heart still beat. Lizzie ordered Bridget to go across the street and fetch Dr. Bowen, the family's doctor and neighbor. Though, I don't know why she asked him to go fetch Dr. Bowen. He already advised them, don't eat the mutton. They didn't listen. Were they going to listen to him now?
Yeah.
He wasn't home, but he would arrive at the Borden's house soon after receiving word of the murder of Andrew. On her way back, Bridget ran into another neighbor, Mrs. Adelaide B. Churchill, who returned to the house with her. According to Mrs. Churchill's later testimony, when she arrived at the doorway to the Borden's house and asked Lizzie what was wrong, Lizzie very calmly said to her, "Oh, Mrs. Churchill, do come over. Someone has killed father."
So formal.
I know. When asked where Abby was, Lizzie reiterated her claim that someone had come, delivered a note, and requested she visit a sick friend, so don't know where Abby is. She went to visit some friend who was under the weather. However, she told Bridget and Mrs. Churchill that Abby had since returned home and asked Bridget to go upstairs and check for her. Given that there had just been a horrific murder in the house, Bridget was like, "Oh, I'm not fucking going up there." She wasn't going to go anywhere alone, and so Mrs. Churchill volunteered to go with her. Bridget hadn't even reached the top of the stairs when she suddenly let out a scream. "Jesus fuck!" Having spotted Abby on the floor of the guest bedroom. Oh, well, I'm doing my Irish accent. Thank you. Mrs. Churchill followed her up and also saw Abby in the room, head torn apart. Vinicum Morse then returned to the Borden house around lunchtime as expected, but suspiciously didn't go right into the house. Instead, he loitered in the yard and ate a pear from the garden. It's like, I always imagine this, he was sitting there, just sitting on maybe a, chair in the garden, eating a pear, not hearing screams and shit coming from the house that two people have just been brutally murdered in, and he's just like, do.
Oh, it gets way weirder than that. So when he came back to the house, it was actually after the police had already arrived. So at that point, there were like rubberneckers crowding outside the Borden house, which apparently he didn't take any notice of. Then he wandered into the backyard walked right past a police officer that was stationed at the side door, which again, he took no notice of that either. And then, as you said, he just started casually picking up pears off the ground and then just started eating them and like leaning against the barn and munching away. So he didn't ask any questions, didn't seem the slight bit curious about why there was like police rushing around in and out of the house, or why the crowd that was gathered outside was getting bigger and bigger as like the minutes went on. Eventually,
what are y'all doing here?
Right. So eventually, after finishing his pear, although one officer did later testify, he saw him eat 3 pears.
I mean, they must have been delicious pears.
Right?
Only the finest Massachusetts pears, people.
Yeah, just chilling out, munching down, chowing down some pears. Morty finally strolled over to the house, and eventually he did introduce himself.
I wish somebody told me.
How was I meant to know?
Are you sure he's not just like an idiot?
Yeah,
he shows up without bringing anything with him, and he seems oblivious to the fact that there's a police investigation is starting next to him.
I can see it actually. It's like, oh, Morris, how's it going? Where's the suitcase? Oh, my suitcase.
Yeah, exactly.
I left it on the train.
Sorry, I was in my own world there. I didn't notice all the police and the blood and the axe and
just keep thinking about your sweet, sweet pears.
Yeah. Emma, by the way, for those of you who are asking where the other Borden girl was, she was in Fairhaven, about 15 miles southwest of Fall River. So she actually had the strongest alibi out of anybody there. She was proven to be in another town. So the police response was immediate, given the Borden status in society and the high level of attention and scrutiny the crime was going to invite. But their investigation was floored, to say the least. Thanks to the general circumstances, Lizzie was pretty much put at the top of the suspect list from the beginning, and she didn't really help herself either. According to pretty much everybody involved in the case, Lizzie seemed far too calm and relaxed, given the sudden brutal nature of her father and stepmother's demise. It was horrific. And she was just there like, sure, shit happens. Like.
Yeah.
She also flip-flopped on her statements of what happened around the time she found her father's body. When she first spoke to the police, she indicated to the officer that she had heard a sort of groaning-like noise coming from the room where she found her father. But just a couple of hours later, she changed it and said, didn't hear a thing.
One of the funnier details about this whole case is that, so even though the police responded pretty quickly, the entire force, it didn't actually show up. And the reason for this was they were at a picnic.
The policeman's picnic?
Yeah.
I love that.
So the murders took place the same day as the Fall River Police Department's annual picnic at Rocky Point. So they were seriously short-handed on that first day, which, depending on how you look at it, was either incredibly lucky or unlucky, depending on if you're an axe murderer or not.
Well, I'm just glad those policemen had a lovely day.
I'm sure they got the call. It's like, no.
So Lizzie could have been ruled out or caught red-handed right then, had a proper search of Lizzie and her room been performed. Unfortunately, attitudes to women at the time weren't what they were now, and instead of turning Lizzie's room upside down and thoroughly inspecting her person and what she had on her, she was allowed to return to her room unattended after officers performed a very basic look around the room, and they didn't open or move a thing, literally just a glance around, just in case she had a bloody axe on her bed, right there in the open. The officers later told the jury that Lizzie had told them she wasn't feeling well, which, given her standing, they took her word and just let her leave, basically without checking her for any blood or evidence she might have had on her. Considering what they would turn up in the next couple of weeks, they would come to regret that decision.
In fairness to the officers, though, they had their best men at the picnic.
They did.
What were they meant to do?
Yeah. They just sent the people who weren't invited. Nobody liked them.
Yeah.
Now, the exact murder weapon was never confirmed, though an axe found in the basement with a broken handle was strongly suspected of being the tool used. 2 more axes, along with 2 further hatchets, were also found in the basement, but were excluded for various reasons, size, cleanliness, that sort of thing. Despite suspicions that the broken hatchet had been deliberately dusted to appear as though it had been there for some time, none of the axes or hatchets were taken away by investigators. They found a broken one that looks like it's planted down there, and they're like, that's weird, but sure, fuck it, who knows?
I'll come back to it.
Yeah. The day before the Bordens were murdered, the same day good Uncle Vinicum arrived, Lizzie had attempted to buy prussic acid, which is hydrogen cyanide, from a local druggist. When she was questioned about the purchase, Lizzie explained that she was intending to use it to clean a fur coat. The thing is, the use of prussic acid for cleaning like this was seriously outdated, even in 1892, but also the responsibility for cleaning a coat would normally fall to Bridget, the maid, not Lizzie. Still, the police seem to have accepted Lizzie's reasoning for why she bought this type of acid.
It was actually never proven that it was Lizzie who attempted to purchase the acid though. So the defense argued that it was a case of misidentification, and the prosecution, they couldn't actually prove it in the end.
Yeah. Another key investigation point seems to have been ignored out of an ill-guided attempt to be proper. A bucket containing blood-soaked rags was discovered during the search of the Borden's house, only to be quickly explained away by Lizzie as being those that she used during her period. She also had a spot of blood on one of her dresses that she told police was from a, quote, flea bite, which was a coded way of saying she was on her period. The explanation was accepted by the police and not looked into any further. It's likely Lizzie was telling the truth, but you never know, and that's probably something you would want to... I mean, I love it. It's like, oh, I'm on my period. Okay, fine, no, too much information.
I know,
we don't need to know.
It's such a sign of the times. Anytime they brought up the blood-soaked rags, like, la 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 la.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. On the evening of the murders, once the bodies had been collected and the police had left, feeling nervous, despite the police keeping watch over the house in case someone came back to finish off the family, Emma and Lizzie were joined by their mutual friend, Alice Russell, who agreed to stay with them in the house that night. One of the officers keeping watch would later testify that he had seen Lizzie and Alice go into the cellar carrying a kerosene lamp and a bucket and a mop. He also said he saw the two leaving the cellar, but then Lizzie returned alone. Though he couldn't be sure, the officer also testified that he thought Lizzie was leaning over the sink, maybe washing. I mean, seriously though, even back in 1892, it's still a murder scene, and they're just like, oh, you can go back into the house, it's fine.
Go about your daily business there.
It's not like there's anything we need from the house, possible murder weapons.
Yeah.
It's grand.
Yeah, that's terrible. Do better.
Vinicum Morse also stayed the night with Emma and Lizzie, though he slept in another guest bedroom on the third floor. He was probably only then realizing, oh, there were murders in his house.
Right, yeah, I know, yeah. This guy wasn't a full shilling.
That didn't stop rumors from running wild, though, that Vinicum Morse was staying in the same room he had the day before, the same room where Abby Borden had been savagely axed to death. He would leave the Borden's house the following day, which was the 5th, but was stopped from doing so by a huge crowd of locals. The mob had to be held back, and Vinicum Morse actually returned to the house. It wasn't until the next day the police finally performed the first proper search of the property, 2 days after the murders, and that's when they removed that broken hatchet they had first discovered before, the one that looked like it had been planted down there to look like, you know, it had been down there for some time, and then maybe Lizzie had been washing. I mean, come on, like, seriously. Later that evening, Lizzie was visited by the mayor, accompanied by the city marshal, and they informed her she was being considered a suspect in the murders. Alice Russell would testify that the next morning she had entered the kitchen to find Lizzie burning strips of fabric torn from a dress on the gas stovetop. Lizzie never denied this happening. Her explanation was that the dress she'd been wearing had been stained with paint. She's getting blood on it, she's getting paint on it, what else are you going to get on it? While prosecutors claimed that it was the dress she'd been wearing on the day of the murders, the claim was never backed up. And Lizzie did have support in her claim that she got paint on her dress, so some people did say, oh, well, she had been painting.
There is the question of why burn something when you can just, throw it away. If you just had paint, throw it away. But I guess it's possible that Andrew Borden, he was just too cheap to have trash taken away, so they were used to burning rubbish for free instead. Yeah. But the timing was incredibly suspicious.
Indeed.
Also, if she was burning it to conceal evidence, why would she do it for the two witnesses? You know?
Yeah. Although, I mean, it's been 2 days and nobody seemed to give a shit, so I was like, oh, fuck it.
Yeah.
No
one's on the ball here.
Yeah. An inquest into the deaths of Abby and Andrew Borden was held on August 8th before Judge Josiah C. Blaisdell, just 4 days on from the murders. Lizzie requested her lawyer be present, which would be standard these days, but the 19th century was a whole other beast, legally speaking. Thanks to the Massachusetts statute that held inquests must be held in private, her request was denied. You can't let anybody in here. This is just for us. Though Miranda rights weren't a thing, Lizzie was also never informed of her constitutional rights. Of course, these days that would have been enough to get the case thrown out right away. But to make it even worse, Lizzie was off her tits on smack. She was out of it. 85,000. Maybe she'd get the same thing Vinicum was on. Okay, well, not quite. She was morphined up the wazoo, having been prescribed laudanum for her nerves in the wake of the murders. So basically, whatever she said in that inquest hearing could have been literally she was high as a kite.
She was out of it, yeah. Like her doctor gave her like the morphine, but then he also prescribed her this like caffeine thing as well to keep her alert, you know?
Right, cocaine back in those days.
Right,
Straight cocaine. Yeah. Back in the good old days. Yeah. So to add to that, a very hostile district attorney, Hosea M. Knowlton, who was clearly going after Lizzie, the cards were really stacked against her. District Attorney Knowlton even asked Lizzie questions about her father's business, clearly trying to establish a motive, despite the job of the inquest being to collect information and not interrogate suspects. Lizzie was clearly out of sorts, and not only did she answer several questions with contradictory answers, Lizzie also flat out refused to answer several questions whose answers could be seen as exonerating, or at least in her favor. Lizzie was also unable to recall details of the morning that she had earlier, whilst also contradicting herself within her own testimony. She answered some of the questions with, "Some of your questions I have difficulty answering because I don't know just how you mean them," and that was considered arrogant. In one answer, she claimed to have been reading when her father returned home, but later said she'd been on the staircase. Another revision said she was ironing in the dining room. During the all-important murder time, Lizzie claimed to have gone out to find some metal to fix something in her room. Another version had her looking for fishing sinkers. Lizzie admitted to her own confusion, saying, "I don't know what I said. I've answered so many questions and I am confused. I don't know one thing from the other." Following the inquest, D.A. Knowlton wrote to the then State Attorney, General Pillsbury, in which he expressed his certainty of Lizzie's guilt. He even went so far to say that her testimony before the inquest could be seen as a confession. It was also during this time that the case first caught national newspapers' attention and became something of a phenomenon. So it's fair to say contemporary newspapers weren't on Lizzie's side, and it's thanks to the articles of the day that many people close to Lizzie and the family switched from staunchly defending her to wholeheartedly believing in her guilt. At the end of her testimony on August 11th, Lizzie was arrested.
The newspapers, they really ran wild on this. So they exaggerated the story to bits. And some just even made up entire details just to keep the readers hooked.
Love it.
I know her. So one infamous young reporter from the Boston Globe, and I swear to God, I'm not making this up, his actual name was Henry Trickey. So he published...
Well, you gotta believe everything he says.
Right? So he published a front page expose on the case that sounded like the smoking gun, you know? But every bit of it was completely made up. Turns out he was working off shady sources and just flat out lies. When it all came out, he fled to Canada, and then not long after, he actually died by getting hit by a train.
Wow, what an interesting life, all Tricky had.
Like it was shortly after the case as well, so it was a bit, like it kind of adds to the whole conspiracy of it, which is good. But it wasn't just the dodgy journalists getting in on the action either. Spiritualists.
Ooh, you love spiritualists.
I do, they're great. So they started crawling out of the woodwork, all claiming they were getting messages from beyond, revealing the true killer. One man said that his Ouija board delivered a full-blown conversation from the spirit world and even handed over an 8-page transcript of the conversation.
Ooh.
Which you probably made up. Not to be outdone by this though, astrologers, they got involved too. So they requested the birth dates of Andrew, Abby and Lizzie to calculate whether Saturn was passing in front of the sun or the moon on the day of the murders. Now, how that was meant to help, I have no idea.
Well, you see... astrology is so fucking dumb. Okay, yeah.
I've honestly, I was looking into it, I have no idea what they were trying to get out of it.
Yeah.
If you're into astrology, let us know.
Yeah, leave it in the comments below, folks. So the wheels of justice moved a lot quicker than they do these days, and soon a grand jury was assembled in November to decide her fate. Lizzie's trial was moved to New Bedford and began on June 5th, 10 months after the murder of her father and stepmother. She was fortunate to have a seriously high-level defense team representing her, including the former governor of Massachusetts, George D. Robinson. As Lizzie was a suspect in the deaths, Emma was the sole inheritor of the estate and was responsible for paying the considerable legal bills. But, I mean, her fortune would have been like, what, $100 million or something? Like, wild? In today's money, I mean.
In today's money, her defense team was like $1 million.
Yeah, so top of the top. That said, the trial was still something of a spectacle given the notoriety of the crime and the players involved. Thanks to the whole morphine mess up, literally everything Lizzie had said during the inquest hearing was considered to be inadmissible as evidence at trial, which was a huge blow to the prosecution. With no hard physical evidence for the prosecution, the trial rested on whether or not the jury would be swayed by the fairly large amount of circumstantial evidence.
that was the prosecution's whole thing. It rested solely on the idea that Lizzie had the means, motive, and opportunity. But there was no evidence, and it was just such a flimsy case. Sure, like, I have the means, motive, and opportunity to bring my daughter to the pub. But there's no proof, school.
Exactly.
You can't prove it.
Do you hear me, school? Well, much like your daughter, allegedly, Bridget was also a tattletale.
Yeah, she ran me out.
Bridget Sullivan was considered the key witness for both the defense and prosecution. After all, she was the only one not related to the family and the only one who didn't stand to benefit financially. Bridget had no motive at all that we know of. Even if she was displeased with her job, she could have left, as she did after the trial was over. Now, Bridget said she went up to her room around 11 a.m., leaving Lizzie with her father. She didn't return to the ground floor until about 15 minutes later, when she heard Lizzie shouting. When she came down, Lizzie had ordered her not to enter the room where her father was and sent her to get the good Dr. Bowen. According to Lizzie, she'd gone out to the barn to look for some iron and had gone for around 20 minutes. According to Adelaide Churchill's testimony, she asked Lizzie where she had been during the murder, and Lizzie had also said she had been out at the barn looking for some iron. 2 more neighbours testified for the defence that they had seen Lizzie leave the barn just after 11 o'clock. So therefore, a lot of people say Lizzie was out at the barn, but I mean, you never know when the murder happened. Adelaide's testimony was both good and bad for the defence. She also alleged that Lizzie hadn't shed a single tear during all of the time she'd been in her company.
For me, like, this is the biggest mystery of the whole case, like the timeline. So, like you said, Bridget went up to her room at 11 a.m, leaving Lizzie alone with her father.
Yeah.
She didn't come back downstairs for about 15 minutes, not until she heard Lizzie shouting. Now, if you believe Lizzie committed both murders, here's what you have to accept. Lizzie first killed Abby violently, like blood everywhere. Then, at some point after, she was seen by Bridget, but she wasn't covered in blood. So she would have had to change her clothes, wash off all the blood off herself in a house with no plumbing. Then, around an hour or so later, almost immediately after Andrew's murder, she was seen again by Bridget, still with no blood. So once again, she would have had to change her clothes again, wash off all the blood off herself again. Like, there was no stains on her hands, feet, her face, in her hair. There was no bloody overalls or sheets that were found that she could have covered herself. Now, there was speculation that she did it all in the nude, which I don't think so. You know, for especially women these days, they're so privy and stuff. But but then the house had, again, like I said, the house had no modern plumbing. So I don't know how she would have cleaned herself up so quickly in that short time frame. But then again, on the flip side, if it was someone outside the house, then you have to believe they killed Abby in a extremely violent way and nobody heard a thing. Then they hid in a tiny house for about an hour or so while people were milling around the place and Bridget was off washing windows.
Yeah.
Then they killed Andrew again violently and nobody heard a thing. Then somehow they managed to leave the house covered in blood, carry a bloody axe, do all this in broad daylight on one of the busiest streets in town, and nobody saw a thing.
Right. Borden had bought the house specifically because it was close to Main Street where he had his businesses.
Exactly.
This wasn't in like a quiet part of Fall River.
Yeah, so like the whole mystery is Lizzie must have done it, but also she couldn't have done it.
What I don't get is whoever killed Abby killed her first, and then it was about an hour later or so. We don't know the exact timeline, but an hour and a half later, Andrew was killed. But everyone would say that Abby was killed in the guest bedroom, and her body was just left there.
Yep.
And her body was visible from the top of the stairs. So her body wasn't like hidden. You could see it, like you could be walking around the house, just walking up steps, and you would clearly see her body. So it's like the killer didn't even attempt to hide the body.
Nope.
It was just a look. Abby wasn't found.
Yeah.
So the killer left the body there sort of in the open and then just wandered around the house. And then it was like, okay, nobody found the person. I guess I'll kill again.
Right, like the killer got so lucky because even though like the body was, and he did say the body was visible from the top of the stairs, but there was an investigator that went in after and they had their assistant lie down where the body was, and they testified in court that when they walked up the stairs, they could see the body if you were looking for it. So if they walked up the stairs in a particular way and was looking in that room, they could see it. But if they're walking up the stairs like you kind of normally would, as if you were like to turn, they couldn't see the body on the floor.
Yeah.
But to your point, still, like, the body was still left out in the open.
It sounds like the door was open to the bedroom.
They didn't make any
close
attempt.
the door.
They made no attempt to hide it.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Yeah, very weird. Like, why would they do that and then hide and go, oh, hope they don't see me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's so strange. One of the most infamous points in the trial backfired spectacularly on the prosecution when they brought in the decimated skulls of the victims for the jury and court to see. When the skulls were unveiled, however, Lizzie swooned and fainted, apparently, at the sight of them. Whether the passing was genuine or an act, it didn't matter. It brought her sympathy among observers and tarnished the prosecution, making them appear vindictive and heartless. Thanks to the strong defense team, a lot of stuff was excluded from the trial as evidence, including the prussic acid, the hydrogen cyanide that she had allegedly attempted to buy, though it may not have been her. The judge decided that that event had no bearing on the case, even though it could be argued that it showed a pattern of behavior and clear intent. But regardless, the jury, they never heard about it. And as you said, it may not even have been her.
Yeah.
One point of contention that the prosecution really should have pushed more on was this mysterious note that Lizzie said Abby had received. The one about a sick friend and that allegedly Abby had left to go visit the sick friend, but only Lizzie knew about it, and then next thing you know, Abby's dead. So not only was such a note never found, but no messenger ever came forward claiming to have delivered the note. No sick friend was found either. Yet, Lizzie stood by the story that a messenger arrived, gave her stepmom a note. Her only explanation was that Abby had told her this, Lizzie said. And Lizzie said she hadn't seen the note herself, but basically what Lizzie was saying, I'm not lying. Abby's got a note and then left to visit a sick friend, but maybe Abby was lying when she told me that. The jury deliberations began on June 20th, 1893. Beginning with some very interesting and far from impartial instructions from Associate Justice Justin Dewey, who had been appointed to his position by, guess who, none other than the Chief Defense Counsel and former Governor, George D. Robinson. So no conflict of interest there at all.
Yeah.
Dewey's instructions were very much in Lizzie's favor and concluded with the request that the 12-person jury, all male, take into account the defendant's Christian character. Normally, the longer deliberations take, the better the outcome is expected for the defense. In Lizzie's case, though, it proved to be an exception, as it took just about an hour and a half for them to return with a not guilty verdict. Regardless of the legal decision, the court of public opinion was still in session and would remain so for the rest of Lizzie Borden's life.
They actually came up with their verdict in 10 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, but out of respect for the prosecution, they decided to wait.
Right, yeah.
Didn't want to make you look bad, guys.
Right, yeah. So, the jury had decided that Lizzie hadn't killed Abby and Andrew. But whom may have? Well, basically anyone else in the household, including Vinicum Morse. In fact, Vinicum Morse was suspected by the police precisely because of just how absurdly solid his alibi was. He gave such a detailed account of his movements and who could corroborate him that it actually made the police suspected that he could have fabricated the whole thing to make sure he wasn't at the house while the family were killed. So therefore, maybe he had a hired gun, an assassin working on his behalf. But again, the thing was, why would he have gone to Fall River at all? It would have been better to have just stayed away from the whole area entirely. Why go visit him unless he was like, maybe I'll just go visit him before I have them killed.
Yeah.
But Vinicum wouldn't have gotten anything.
Yeah.
He had no financial,
no
skin in the game, unless he was like, revenge for my, sister, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's saying, was he a fool or just plain the fool? I think he was a fool.
Yes, I think so too. Like Vinicum Morse, Emma Borden, the other sister, she too had a rock-solid alibi being in Fairhaven at the time of the murders. As I said earlier, Bridget was also never really under suspicion, and despite police looking into the possibility of Lizzie and Bridget working together, they later ruled this out, thanks largely to how many of Bridget's statements implicated Lizzie. I mean, Bridget wouldn't have said all these things about Lizzie if they had been working together. Another interesting idea was from outside the household, but in the family. Well, sort of. A man named William Borden was thought to be Andrew's illegitimate son and was first named as a suspect by author Arnold Brown. Brown alleged that William's motivation was an extortion plot. When his father refused to pay up, William decided to kill him. There are several problems with this theory, though, is that, well, it was proven later that William Borden was not Andrew's son at all. So there you go. Kind of rules out.
Yeah.
So the idea of it being anyone from outside the Borden household just didn't really make much sense considering the time gap between Abby and Andrew's death. As we already talked about, we went through, it would have meant that the killer would have had to hide in the house after killing Abby, who they left out in the open, while Bridget and Lizzie were both walking around. They got lucky by nobody finding Abby and then killed Andrew before sneaking out of the house, which just doesn't seem very realistic, or it doesn't seem realistic anybody killed him, honestly.
Know,
it's like,
right?
who could have done this? It's just so weird.
Yeah, it's so strange.
So that brings us straight back to suspect number 1, Lizzie. It seems possible, probable, maybe that Lizzie killed her dad and stepmom in order to inherit the estate. I mean, that explains why Abby was killed first. As if Andrew had been killed first, that would have changed the line of inheritance. If Andrew had been killed, all his stuff would have went to Abby. And then if Abby was killed, all her stuff would have went to her family. So you have to kill Abby first to make sure that it skips Abby and goes straight to you.
Yeah. But like he still had a will. And the lawyer, he testified that there'd be no changes to the will.
Wow.
Nothing had changed. Yeah.
There you go. So that kind of rules out that one. Maybe it's just a mad serial killer.
Right? Yeah.
Honestly, that's like literally has to be kind of one of those like act of God, you know what I mean? Like something just completely separate from what was going on in the house.
Yeah. And hid in the attic or something.
Exactly, yeah. So despite the not guilty verdict, Lizzie was never able to shake the axe murderer label, and the question was changed from who to why. And the answer to that is just simply money. Very simply, Lizzie and Emma stood to gain Andrew's wealth after his and Abby's deaths. Even in 1967, new theories were still coming forward. It was suggested that Lizzie might have committed the murders while in a sort of fugue state, which she suggested could have been brought on by Lizzie's period, which, I mean, shows, I guess, what people thought back in the day. It's like a 30 Rock sketch. You remember it's a sketch they do in the show where it's Amelia Earhart, she's driving over the Pacific and everything's going well, and then all of a sudden, oh no, my period! Just crashes the plane. It's literally like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like, they're women, they're not werewolves.
Yeah. I think it's more likely the mutton.
It could be the mutton.
Their food poisoning got so bad they got an axe and murdered somebody. The contemporary press also had a lot to say on Lizzie and had a lot of fun, suggesting that Lizzie may have been a secret lesbian and in a relationship with Bridget. Now, the mere suggestion of this was considered salacious. As soon as the trial was over, Bridget left, took another job, never contacted Lizzie again. Still, the press enjoyed suggesting that maybe Abby had walked in on the pair engaging in some sort of sexual endeavor and Lizzie had killed her to avoid the shame. This sounds like something written by your buddy, Tricky.
I know, yeah.
He would write this, invent some bullshit like this.
Lizzie didn't even bother to learn her name. She's not getting in a relationship with this woman.
Then there's the modern and even more damaging accusation that Lizzie was being abused by her father and killed him in a rage. This was also hinted at in the press during and after the trial, and though it's an interesting theory, there's no real evidence to support it at all. The rumors about Lizzie's sexuality didn't end with Bridget Sullivan though, and extended into her later years, long after the murders. And Bridget Sullivan, by the way, she later moved to Butte, Montana, where she settled down, married, and eventually died in 1948. Lizzie was unmarried at the time of the murders, which was considered highly unusual considering she was a whopping 32 years old at the time, an old maiden.
God, mind you being in your 30s.
Only 20 days after the trial, Lizzie and Emma moved out of the now infamous house, but remained together for some time. They bought a house at 7 French Street, still in Fall River, which Lizzie later renamed Maplecroft. The house was in an area in Fall River known as The Hill. It was home to the who's who of town, and only for those who could afford the serious price tags that came with living there. The house wasn't the only thing to get a change of name either. In an attempt to move on from the trial and deaths of her parents, Lizzie changed her name to Lisbeth. Nobody will ever find me. And she kept the Borden, so
no one will ever know.
They're looking for a Lizzie Borden. They'll never find.
No, I'm Lisbeth Borden.
Lisbeth Borden.
What's with
Still living in the same town. Emma and the newly minted Elizabeth moved into the 7-bedroom, 3.5-bathroom Maplecroft, hopefully with warm and running water, as Lizzie was almost completely shunned in society throughout the rest of her life. In 1905, Lizzie and Emma stopped talking, and Emma moved out of the house, moving away to New Hampshire, and the two sisters never spoke again. No one is sure why they had such an abrupt breaking up, but it's thought to be over a man, as it always seems to be. Despite having no contact for years, Emma and Lizzie died just 9 days apart from one another. Lizzie died on June 1st, 1927, aged just 66. She died of pneumonia and was buried under the name Elizabeth in Oak Grove Cemetery. Having no children and being unmarried, Lizzie left her considerable estate to the Animal Rescue Legion. Emma had fallen and broken her hip the same day Lizzie died, leading to an infection that took her life 9 days later. And there you have it. That is the story of Lizzie Borden with an axe.
Yeah.
Maybe, maybe not.
What a story. I've honestly, This has just caused more questions.
It's such a fascinating whodunit. This one, it's one of the more interesting stories. Another thing I was supposed to do while I was in Fall River was this: you can stay at the house Fall River.
Yeah.
You can stay there overnight. I actually had booked it, but I had to cancel. But yeah, you can stay in the house, and it's really weird. You can pay to stay in the room where Abby was murdered.
Right.
And you can even have like them put props, pay extra to have them put props in the room, like an axe and a haunted doll and this kind of shit. And they do like walkthroughs and like with ghost hunters. They leave ghost hunting equipment like what are those things called for detecting frequencies? EMPs or EVPs?
EVPs.
Yeah. You can do all like you can have those props in the room and ghost hunt if you want.
That's so funny.
It's wild.
Yeah, that's gas. Look, as long as the breakfast isn't mutton, I'm okay.
Yay, very nice. So, it's haunted. What do you think? Do you think there's actual ghosts there, Keith, in the Borden house? I mean...
Well, apparently so. Over the years, both guests and staff at the Borden house have all reported all sorts of eerie ghosting going on.
Ooh.
So people have heard a woman weeping, footsteps pacing the halls, doors opening and closing on her own. Some claim to have seen a Victorian-era woman tidying the place. Sometimes guests, while they're still in the bed, they see that. Others have heard voices coming from empty rooms. One guest even saw a photo flip off a table into the air and across the room.
Ooh.
So some spooky shit.
Man, yeah, it seems very, very haunted. Interesting. But yeah, I just still can't get over it. Who could have done it?
Fuck, it was Lizzie.
Yeah. That sounds good to me. All right. Case closed. All right, folks. Thank you so much for listening to this whole episode of the That Chapter podcast. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed telling it. This was a fun one.
It was good. I enjoyed it, yeah.
As always, please rate and review and tell your friends. Or else.
I'll get you an axe.
Yeah, exactly. Lizzie Borden will visit you tonight in your sleep. All right, guys. But yeah, until the next whole episode, remember, new podcast exclusive episode, brand new shampoo with me and Dirty Keith every Monday. On Fridays, you get like a kind of bonus episode, either listener stories, which we need to do more of, or it'll be the audio of a remastered audio from a video. And yeah, that kind of wraps up this whole one. So cheers, everybody, to listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
And I'll see you.
All right. Thanks, folks. Bye. By burping.
That cucumber water.
Yeah. Oh, it's coming up.